Prologue. The rain lashed against my window, each drop a tiny hammer blow against the thin glass, mirroring the frantic pounding in my chest. Tonight was different. Tonight the city felt like a living, breathing monster, its concrete teeth ready to chew me up and spit me out. I gripped the cheap plastic phone tighter, my knuckles white. My mother's voice, usually a comforting hum across the miles, was a frayed wire crackling with fear. "Aurora, you have to be careful," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm outside and the growing storm inside me. "They're getting closer. I can feel it." I swallowed, the sound like sandpaper in my throat. "Mom, I'm fine. Just another day in the city." Why? A blatant, desperate lie. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt like a cage. Every shadow was a lurking threat, every creak of the old building a phantom footstep. "No, baby. This isn't about just another day. This is about us." Her voice broke and I pictured her miles away, clutching her worn rosary, her eyes wide with a fear I knew all too well. The fear that lived in my own bones, a constant tremor beneath my carefully constructed facade. The fear of being found. The fear of being seen for what I truly was. My gaze drifted to the full moon, a luminous, spectral eye peering through the bruised clouds. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also a cruel mistress. It called to me, a relentless ancient song that hummed in my blood, yearning to be set free. But I couldn't. Not here. Not in this concrete jungle where a single mistake could cost me everything. A sudden sharp clang from the fire escape outside my window made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. I pressed myself against the wall, my breath catching. "Mom, I have to go," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Be safe, my heart. Always remember who you are. Remember your strength." Her words were a lifeline even as they felt like a heavy chain. I hung up, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. The clang repeated, closer this time. A shadow, dark and ominous, moved on the fire escape, silhouetted against the pale glow of the moon. My heart hammered, a drumbeat of pure terror. They found me. After all these years of running, of hiding, of pretending, they found me. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my insides. My carefully built world, my quiet human life was crumbling. My secretary job, my tiny apartment, my meticulously crafted anonymity. It was all a lie. And now the truth, savage and untamed, was scratching at my window. My hands clenched, my nails digging into my palms. My senses, usually dulled for self-preservation, sharpened with terrifying speed. I could smell the rain, the damp concrete, the faint metallic scent of fear, my own. But beneath it, a new scent, acrid and primal, filled the air. A scent I recognized with a sickening jolt. Oof. Not just one. Several. And they weren't friendly. The shadow on the fire escape pressed against the glass, distorting into a grotesque, inhuman shape. My breath hitched. This wasn't a mugger. This was far, far worse. This was the past I had fled, the violence I had desperately tried to outrun finally catching up. A low growl vibrated through the glass, a sound that twisted my gut. My own blood thrummed, a fierce, desperate countergrowl threatening to break free. I fought the urge to transform, to unleash the raw power that lay dormant within me. Not yet. Not here. Not where I could expose myself, expose everything I had fought to protect. But the fear, pure and undiluted, was turning into something else. Something colder, harder, bigger. A fiery, protective rage that ignited deep within my core. I wouldn't go down without a fight. I wouldn't let them drag me back into the life I had escaped. My eyes scanned the room, desperately searching for anything, any weapon, any means of escape. My small, practical kitchen knife. My heavy ceramic mug. Pathetic against what was surely waiting for me. The glass of the window groaned, then cracked. A splintering sound that echoed in the silence of my apartment, in the deafening roar of my own fear. They were coming in. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my human life in New York City was about to shatter just like that window. The monster I had tamed, the wolf I had caged, was about to be unleashed. And I had no idea if I could put it back. Or if I even wanted to. Chapter 1. The Human Mask. My alarm clock blared, a rude interruption to the nightmare of the night before. I slammed my hand down, silencing the shrill noise, and slowly opened my eyes. The first rays of dawn, weak and watery, filtered through my cracked window. A very real, very physical reminder of the prologue to terror that had played out just hours ago. No shadow figures, no growls, no immediate threats had materialized in the end. Just the growing dread and the spiderweb crack in my window pane, a testament to how close to the edge I'd truly felt. I sighed, a long, weary exhalation that deflated my chest. Another day of donning the mask of Aurora Kane, the efficient, unassuming secretary. My corporate armor. I dragged myself out of bed, the aches and phantom pains of my restless night settling into my muscles. My small apartment, usually a haven of quiet solitude, now felt tainted by the lingering scent of my fear, and that faint acrid smell that hinted at the predator I usually kept buried deep. I stood in front of the mirror studying my reflection. Dark circles under my eyes, a slight tremor in my hands as I brushed my hair. I looked like what I was, a woman on the run, perpetually looking over her shoulder. But I couldn't afford to show that at Blackwood Enterprises. Damian Blackwood, my boss, was a man who noticed everything. Or so the rumors went. He was a force of nature in the corporate world, a billionaire real estate mogul who had carved out an empire with ruthless precision. And I, Aurora Kane, was his personal secretary. A stark contrast to the wild, untamed thing I was inside. My morning routine was a ritual of denial. I forced myself to eat a quick breakfast, the taste of the bland cereal like ash in my mouth. I dressed in my usual sensible skirt and blouse, colors that blended, shapes that concealed. No bright patterns, no bold statements. Just professional forgettable. I wanted to be a ghost in the office, a whisper of efficiency, not a roar of power. Stepping out into the bustling streets of New York City was always a shock to the system. The cacophony of car horns, the shouts of street vendors, the endless river of people rushing past. It was a sensory overload that I had learned to navigate by shutting down most of my heightened senses. I had to, otherwise the sheer volume of humanity, their emotions, their scents, their subtle tells would overwhelm me. I walked with my head down, my pace brisk, a small island of calm in the chaotic sea. My thoughts drifted to Damian Blackwood. He was an enigma even to those who worked closest to him. Tall, dark, and impossibly handsome, with eyes that seemed to pierce through your very soul. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it was a subtle tilt of his lips that hinted at something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. He was a man of few words, but every word carried weight, every glance held an unspoken command. I had worked for him for 2 years, and in all that time I felt like I knew nothing about him beyond his professional facade. And that was precisely how I liked it. Distance was safety. The Blackwood Enterprises building was a gleaming skyscraper, a monument to Damian's ambition and power. As I stepped into the opulent lobby, the cool, polished marble and the hushed atmosphere always felt like entering a different world. A world where I could pretend to be just Aurora Kane, secretary. Not Aurora Kane, hidden wolf, running from a past that threatened to swallow her whole. Up in my office, which was adjacent to Damian's grand corner suite, I began my day. Emails, appointments, reports. The mundane tasks were a comfort, a distraction from the primal fear that still hummed beneath my skin. I typed, clicked, and organized, my fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced ease. My mind, however, kept replaying the image of that cracked window, the phantom growl. Was it real? Or was my paranoia simply getting the better of me? Around 10 o'clock, the door to Damian's office opened and he emerged, his presence instantly filling the room. He moved with a silent, effortless grace that always unnerved me. It was the way a predator moved, powerful, controlled, ready to strike. He wore a perfectly tailored suit as always, but today there was a subtle tension in his jaw, a tightness around his dark eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Morning, Mr. Blackwood," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I stood, retrieving his coffee, black, 2 sugars, always perfect. He took the mug from me, his fingers brushing mine for a fleeting moment. A spark, a jolt shot through me, hot and electric. My breath hitched. It always happened, that strange, inexplicable connection, like two magnets drawn to each other despite every effort to resist. He held my gaze for a fraction of a second longer than usual, and in those dark depths I thought I saw something. Something primal, unreadable. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual stoic expression. "Kane," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. "Any pressing matters I need to attend to immediately?" "No, sir. Your schedule is clear until your 11 a.m. meeting with the Sterling Group. I've placed all the relevant documents on your desk." He nodded, already turning back towards his office. "Good. Hold all my calls. I need to focus." "Of course, Mr. Blackwood." The door clicked shut, leaving me alone again, the lingering scent of his expensive cologne and something else, something subtly wild, filling the air. My heart was still thudding from the brief encounter, the residual electricity buzzing in my fingertips. It was ridiculous. He was my boss. A human. And I was something else. A secret I had guarded with my life. The rest of the day passed in a blur of paperwork and hushed phone calls. I found myself glancing at Damien's closed door more often than usual, a strange sense of unease settling over me. Was it just my paranoia from the night before, or was there truly something different about him today? His usual composure seemed to be stretched thin, a barely perceptible tension radiating from him even through the thick office walls. As the afternoon wore on, a new subtle scent wafted into my office. It was faint, barely noticeable beneath the perfumes and food smells of the city, but my heightened senses picked it up. A musky, earthy scent like damp forest floor and wet fur. A scent that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Another wolf. In the building. My blood ran cold. My carefully constructed world was cracking open, not just at my window but right here in the heart of my supposed safe zone. I instinctively straightened, my posture becoming more rigid, my senses reaching out, trying to pinpoint the source. It was faint, distant, but undeniable. Could it be? Was my past truly catching up to me even here? Or was it him? Damien. The thought was ludicrous. He was a human, a powerful CEO. There was no way he could be. A chill ran down my spine. What if he wasn't? What if everything I thought I knew was wrong? What if the intense pull I felt towards him, the strange sense of familiarity and danger, wasn't just my imagination? The scent faded, or perhaps I simply forced myself to ignore it, to push it back into the subconscious corners of my mind. I couldn't afford to panic. Not now. I had a job to do. I had a human mask to maintain. As quitting time approached, a sense of dread began to creep in. The city outside seemed to darken prematurely, the sky bruised purple and gray. Another storm was brewing, I could feel it in the air, a heavy, oppressive energy. I packed my bag, my movements stiff and automatic. I hated walking home in the dark, especially when the moon was full, especially when my senses were on high alert. Just as I was about to leave, the door to Damien's office opened again. He stood there, framed by the softly lit interior, his gaze intense. "Kane," he said, his voice low. A moment. My heart skipped a beat. This was unusual. He rarely kept me past working hours. I walked towards his office, my steps hesitant, my mind racing. What could he want? Was it about work? Or was it something else? Something connected to the growing sense of unease that had plagued me all day? He gestured for me to sit on one of the plush leather chairs opposite his desk, but remained standing, leaning against the edge of the polished mahogany. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words, a palpable tension that made my skin prickle. He crossed his arms over his chest, his dark eyes fixed on mine, unwavering. It felt like he was looking right through me, peeling back layers of my carefully constructed facade. "I need you to stay late tonight," he said, his voice deep, resonating in the quiet room. "There's a situation. Something urgent." My stomach clenched. Urgent. The word hung in the air, charged with unspoken meaning. My wolf instincts screamed at me to run, to flee, to hide. But my human mask, my professional duty, forced a polite response. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. How can I assist?" He pushed himself off the desk, walking slowly towards the large window that overlooked the glittering panorama of the city. His back was to me, but I could feel the intensity of his presence, radiating like heat. It's not work-related, Kane. My blood ran cold. The admission, so unexpected, felt like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, frantically searching for an explanation, for a way to maintain my distance, my anonymity. I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Blackwood. He turned, and in his eyes I saw it. Not just the cold, calculating gaze of a billionaire CEO, but something ancient, something wild, something that mirrored the beast lurking within me. His lips, usually thin and unyielding, curved into a faint, almost predatory smile. "Oh, I think you do, Aurora," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that sent shivers down my spine. "Use my first name." "You never use my first name. I think you understand perfectly well." The air crackled, thick with unspoken truths. My human mask shattered. The fear, the anger, the wolf within rose to the surface, snarling. He knew. All this time he knew. And now he was finally ready to show his hand. The game was over. My quiet human life was a beautiful lie, finally exposed. And the man who had exposed it was not just my boss, but something far, far more dangerous. The city outside glowed, oblivious to the silent battle brewing in this opulent office. The moon, now fully visible, bathed the room in its cold, silver light, illuminating the truth that had been hidden for so long. The truth that Damian Blackwood was not just a powerful CEO. He was something else. And in his eyes, I saw the undeniable reflection of my own hidden nature. The hunt was on. And I was the prey. Or was I? The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Chapter 2: The First Shift. The silence in the office was deafening, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the frantic thumping of my own heart. Damian Blackwood stood before me, his eyes now glowing with an otherworldly amber light, a stark contrast to the human dark brown I had always known. The shift was subtle, a mere flicker, but it was enough. The air around him shimmered with a raw, predatory power that made every cell in my body stand at attention. "You know," he said, his voice no longer just a rumble but a low, guttural purr that sent shivers down my spine. "The scent of a hidden Luna is unmistakable. Especially when you try so hard to mask it." My carefully constructed facade shattered, the shards of my human life clattering to the polished marble floor of my mind. The fear, the anger, the defiance, it all swirled into a maelstrom inside me. My own eyes, I knew, were starting to burn with a dangerous silver light. I met his gaze, refusing to back down. "And the scent of an arrogant alpha is equally overpowering," I retorted, the words tumbling out of my mouth before I could stop them. This wasn't the docile secretary. This was the wolf. This was the part of me that had been caged for so long. A flicker of something, amusement, surprise, crossed his face, and his lips curved into a genuine, albeit brief, smile. "Feisty. I like that." He walked back to his desk, picking up a sealed envelope. "I've been watching you, Aurora. Not just as an employee. I've known about your nature since the day you started. Your little human life, your meticulously crafted persona. It was all very convincing. To a human." He tossed the envelope on his desk. "But the scent of your wolf, a scent of a lone wolf, has been a mystery to me. Till now. I've been waiting for you to make a move to show your hand, but it seems you're content with living on the fringes." "Content?" I scoffed, my voice laced with venom. "I'm surviving. There's a difference. And I'm not your Luna. I don't belong to anyone." He laughed, a sound that was both human and entirely wolf. A low, chest-shaking sound that vibrated through the room. "Don't you? A rogue pack has been tracking you for months, Aurora. They've been trying to force your hand, to bring you out of hiding. Last night wasn't just some mugging. It was a test. A subtle threat." My blood ran cold. He knew about last night. He knew about the shadows on my fire escape, the phantom growl. The world spun. All this time I had been running blindly, thinking I was alone, when in fact I was a player in a game I didn't even know was being played. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, my voice raw with a mix of fear and betrayal. "And break your little charade? You wouldn't have believed me. Besides, it wasn't my place." He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. But now they've become more reckless. And so the rules have changed. Your human life is no longer safe. He turned back to face me, his gaze now as sharp and focused as a hunter's. You have two choices, Aurora. You can stay here and try to face them alone, which is a suicide mission. Or you can come with me. Join my pack. Be protected. The words hung in the air, a terrifying proposition. Join a pack? I had been a lone wolf since I was a teenager. The idea of being tied to a group, to a leader, was suffocating. My fiercely independent nature roared in protest. No. I won't be collared. I won't be owned. A deep sigh escaped his lips. This isn't about ownership, Aurora. It's about survival. They won't stop until they have you. Your scent is a beacon, a challenge to them. They see your independence as weakness, a prize to be claimed. And a Luna without an alpha is a prize to be claimed by every rogue who smells her. His words hit me like a physical blow. The reality of my situation, the true danger I was in, finally sank in. My independence, my pride, it was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The thought of being captured by some brutal rogue alpha, forced into a pack, a fate worse than death, made my blood run cold. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He held my gaze, his own softening just a fraction, a momentary crack in the alpha persona. I want you to be safe. I want you to be with your people. And I want what is mine. The possessiveness in his voice, the raw, unapologetic claim, was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. The primal part of me, the wolf, recognized the scent of a fated mate, and a deep, satisfied hum resonated through my veins. But the human part of me, the part that had fought so hard for its independence, screamed in protest. And what if I refuse? I said, my chin raised in defiance. What if I just leave? Disappear? A dark shadow crossed his face and his eyes hardened, the amber light flaring. You can try, but they will find you. And when they do, your fate will be much worse than just being collared, as you so eloquently put it. I am offering you an alliance. A partnership. Don't be foolish enough to turn it down. He was right. I knew he was. I had been running for too long and I was exhausted. My fear of being found was now eclipsed by the greater, more immediate terror of what would happen if I wasn't protected. I had always been so proud of being a lone wolf, but in that moment I realized just how fragile that pride truly was. What would I have to do? I asked, my shoulders slumping in defeat. A flicker of triumph shone in his eyes. You come with me. You learn to embrace your wolf. You learn to trust me. And you let me protect you. He walked towards me, his presence overwhelming. He smelled of rain-soaked earth, of pine trees, of something wild and untamed. The scent was intoxicating, pulling at me with a force I couldn't fight. It won't be easy, Aurora. You've been running for so long, you've forgotten how to live. He reached out and gently cupped my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin. The contact was like an electric current, igniting every nerve ending. My breath hitched. And I'm going to remind you, he murmured, his voice a promise and a threat all at once. Now let's go. I have a plane waiting. Your human life is over. Your real life is just beginning. The sound of my phone buzzing on my desk shattered the moment. I flinched, pulling away from his touch. He stepped back, a subtle, almost imperceptible growl rumbling in his chest. I looked at the caller ID, my mother. My human life might be over, but I had one last call to make. One last goodbye. I picked up the phone, my hand shaking. Mom, I whispered, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. It's me. I'm leaving. I'll explain later. I hung up before she could respond, knowing she would understand. She had known this day would come. She had been preparing me for it my entire life. I looked back at Damien, at the powerful, enigmatic man who was no longer just my boss, but a werewolf alpha and my fated mate. His eyes were fixed on me, a deep, knowing look in them. The line between my two worlds had just been irrevocably erased. The corporate secretary was dead. The wolf was about to be reborn. And a new, terrifying and exhilarating chapter of my life was about to begin. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time I was no longer running. I was walking, head held high, into the eye of the storm. Chapter 3: The Pack. The world outside the private jet's window was a blur of darkness, a ribbon of city lights giving way to the inky blackness of rural America. I sat across from Damien, the hum of the engines the only sound besides the quiet, rhythmic tapping of my foot on the plush carpet. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, confusion, and a strange, nascent excitement. I was no longer Aurora Kane, the secretary. I was just Aurora, the werewolf on the run, now in the company of the most powerful and enigmatic alpha I had ever met. "You're an accountant, right?" he asked, his voice a low, unexpected interruption. I blinked, momentarily thrown off by the mundane question. "A secretary. A personal secretary to a CEO, to be exact." My voice was brittle, defensive. A faint smile touched his lips. "Right. You've been doing a remarkable job of keeping your books balanced, both professionally and otherwise." He paused, his gaze fixed on my face. "I've been reviewing your file. Your personal one. No family. No close friends. You've cut all ties. The scent of a ghost, a phantom wolf." His words hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just my boss, he had been my watcher. He knew my secrets, my solitude, the carefully built walls I had erected around my life. The thought was both infuriating and strangely comforting. I had been so alone for so long. "Survival," I said, my voice low. "I had to. You can't leave a trail if you're a ghost." "True," he conceded. "But a ghost cannot thrive. She can only exist. I want you to live, Aurora. Truly live." The jet began its descent, the lights of a sprawling estate coming into view. It was a secluded haven, nestled in a valley surrounded by dense forests. I could feel the energy of the land, a raw, primal power that vibrated through the plane. This was his territory. This was his home. And now, for better or worse, it was mine too. We landed on a private airstrip, a sleek black car waiting for us on the tarmac. Elias Ward, a tall, powerfully built man with a quiet strength in his eyes, stood by the car. His scent, a mix of old leather and fresh pine, was a soothing anchor in the sea of my emotions. "Beta." Damien's right hand. He nodded at Damien, his gaze lingering on me for a moment, a flash of curiosity in his dark eyes. "Welcome home, Alpha," Elias said, his voice a low, steady rumble. He held the car door open for me. I slid into the back seat, the scent of leather and power filling the confined space. Damien sat beside me, his presence a heavy, overwhelming force. Elias drove, navigating the winding dirt roads that led to the heart of the estate. The Blackwood Pax compound was a marvel. A sprawling manor house with modern architecture was surrounded by smaller, more rustic cabins, a large training ground, and a vast, enclosed forest. The scent of dozens of wolves, each with their own unique signature, filled the air. It was a cacophony of power, a symphony of a shared existence that I had only ever dreamed of. "This is it," Damien said, his voice a quiet command. "This is my home. This is your future." He led me into the main house, a grand, open space with high ceilings and a massive fireplace. Pack members moved about, their eyes wide with curiosity as they took in my presence. "Aluna." The word seemed to hang in the air, a whisper on everyone's lips. They were sizing me up, judging me. I could feel their collective consciousness, a silent hum of questions and assessments. Damien introduced me to a few of the senior members, his voice formal, his words a clear declaration of my new status. "This is Aurora. She is under my protection. Any harm that comes to her is an attack on me and on this pack." His words were a warning, a line in the sand. I was his. At least for now. That night, I was given a private room, a cozy, rustic cabin with a massive bed and a fireplace. The room smelled of fresh pine and clean laundry, a stark contrast to my cramped, urban apartment. As I lay in the soft bed, I could feel the pack around me, a silent, powerful presence. It was strange and a little terrifying, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel so alone. The next morning, the real training began. Damien didn't waste any time. He took me to the training grounds, a vast clearing in the forest. He stripped off his shirt, his muscles rippling under his tanned skin, and his gaze was all business. "You've been hiding your wolf for too long, Aurora. It's time to let her out. I hesitated, my palms sweating. Shifting in front of someone else was an act of ultimate vulnerability. It was a surrender. My wolf, fierce and independent, resisted. She snarled, she growled, but Damien's will, his raw alpha power, was an irresistible force. Now, Aurora, he commanded, his voice a low, dangerous tone. Unleash her. Let her run. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let go. The transformation was agonizing, a familiar tearing of my flesh, a cracking of my bones. But this time it was different. I was letting go not just for survival but for the first time in my life for myself. I felt the surge of power, the raw, untamed energy of my wolf coursing through my veins. The world smelled, sounded, and felt different, more vibrant, more alive. I opened my eyes, a low growl rumbling in my chest. I was a wolf, a majestic, powerful creature with silver fur and piercing green eyes. I met Damien's gaze, his own wolf, a massive black beast with glowing amber eyes standing before me. He was breathtaking, a perfect representation of raw power and untamed nature. He nudged me with his snout, a silent command to follow. We ran through the forest, the wind whipping through my fur, the feel of the soft earth under my paws. It was pure, unadulterated freedom. I felt alive. I felt wild. Felt home. We ran for hours, a blur of motion and raw power. When we finally stopped, panting at the edge of a roaring river, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I shifted back, exhausted and exhilarated. My human body was sore, but my spirit was soaring. Damien shifted back as well, his eyes, still with a hint of their amber glow, fixed on me. You see, he said, his voice soft, a stark contrast to his usual hard tone. You don't have to be a ghost anymore. He reached out and gently touched my face. You're a force of nature, Aurora. A beautiful, powerful force of nature. And you're mine. His words, his touch, his scent. It was an overwhelming assault on my senses. He was right. I was a part of something bigger now. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a member of a pack. I was a Luna. And I was falling for my alpha, the man who had torn down my walls and shown me how to truly live. A dangerous, forbidden love that had started with a single crack in a window pane. A love that would either save me or destroy me completely. Chapter 4: The Shadow War. The days bled into weeks, each one a whirlwind of training, strategy, and a dangerous, simmering tension between Damien and me. Our relationship was a complex dance of professional distance and primal attraction. In the corporate world, he was my boss, the cold, calculating CEO. Here, in the heart of his pack, he was my alpha, my mate, the man who was teaching me how to be a wolf. We spent our mornings on the training grounds, sparring in our wolf forms. I was fast, agile, a ghost in the trees. He was pure power, a mountain of black fur and muscle. He would push me, test my limits, forcing me to use my instincts instead of my human brain. He'd corner me, a low growl rumbling in his chest, and I'd fight back, a desperate snarl of defiance. The training was brutal, exhausting, but each day I felt my strength growing, my connection to my inner wolf solidifying. The nights were filled with pack duties and quiet conversations. I learned about his pack's history, their struggles, their triumphs. I met his beta, Elias, a quiet but fiercely loyal wolf who watched over me with a protective gaze that reminded me of a big brother. Elias and I formed a silent understanding, a bond forged in shared duty and a mutual respect for our alpha. But the peace was a fragile illusion. The rival alpha, a ruthless and ambitious wolf named Silas Cross, was a constant, looming threat. He was a force of nature, a territorial tyrant who craved power and control. He knew about me, about my presence in Damien's pack, and he saw it as both a prize to be claimed and a challenge to be conquered. The war began subtly, a shadow of things to come. In the corporate world, our companies, Blackwood Enterprises and Cross Industries, were engaged in a hostile takeover. Damien was relentless, using his business acumen to dismantle Silas's empire piece by piece. I was back in my secretary role, but this time the stakes were higher. I was no longer just typing reports. I was on the front lines, helping Damien fight a war that mirrored the one being waged in the wild. I sat in my office one afternoon, a mountain of files on my desk when Elias walked in, his face grim. "He's getting desperate, Aurora," he said, his voice low. "Silas just made a move on a key property in the city. It's a strategic blow, one we didn't see coming." My heart sank. A corporate setback was one thing, but this was more than just business. This was a challenge. A territorial claim. I looked at Elias, my mind racing. "How?" "We don't know," he admitted, his eyes filled with frustration. "He's one step ahead of us. It's like he knows our every move." A chilling thought crept into my mind. I looked at the files on my desk, the blueprints for Damien's next move, the confidential documents I had been working on. A new, terrifying scent, faint but undeniable, filled the air in my office. A scent I had never smelled before, not on any of Damien's pack members. It was a musky, metallic scent, a scent of a wolf I didn't know. A rogue wolf, a spy. The realization hit me with the force of a punch. There was a mole. A traitor in our midst. My mind, trained for years to find discrepancies, to notice the smallest detail, began to race. I had to find them. I had to warn Damien. That night I went to Damien's office, my heart pounding in my chest. He was hunched over his desk, a map of the city spread out before him, his face a mask of frustration and fury. "Damien," I said, my voice trembling. "I think there's a spy. Someone is leaking information to Silas." He looked up, his eyes a cold, hard obsidian. "What makes you say that?" "There's a scent in my office," I said, my voice gaining strength as I explained my findings. "A new scent. It's subtle, but it's there. A wolf who doesn't belong." He rose from his chair, his presence a powerful, intimidating force. He walked towards me, his scent, his primal, dominant scent, filling the room. He leaned in close, his nose brushing against my hair, my neck. He inhaled deeply, his eyes closed. I could feel his wolf, a quiet, intense awareness. He was confirming my suspicions. When he finally opened his eyes, they were glowing with a fierce, dangerous light. "You're right," he said, his voice a low growl. "You're absolutely right. But who?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'll find them. I promise." I spent the next few days in a state of high alert, my senses turned up to their maximum. I was no longer just a secretary. I was a detective, a spy, a wolf on the hunt. I watched everyone, catalogued their scents, their movements, their subtle tells. I found nothing. The war escalated. Corporate moves were met with violent wolf clashes. Hostile takeovers were followed by brutal territorial fights. Silas was growing more confident, more reckless. His next move was a personal one. A blow meant to hit Damien where it hurt. He attacked our compound. Not the main house, not the training grounds, but the smaller, more secluded cabins where the families lived. A direct, violent act meant to send a message. My heart was in my throat as I watched the news reports, the headlines screaming of a mysterious fire and unknown assailants. I looked at Damien, his face a mask of controlled fury, his eyes burning with a dangerous light. Silas had crossed a line. And there was no turning back now. The shadow war had moved into the light. And I, the quiet, unassuming secretary, was caught in the middle. I had to choose a side. My corporate world or my wolf world. But I knew deep down that they were no longer two separate entities. They were one. And I had to fight for both. Chapter 5. The Deception. The air in the Blackwood compound was thick with tension, a palpable hum of grief and rage. The fire had been contained, the casualties minimal, but the message from Silas was loud and clear. He was willing to target the innocent to get what he wanted. He was an animal, a monster, and my blood boiled with a fury I had never known. The quiet, unassuming secretary was gone. In her place was a she-wolf, a Luna ready to fight for her pack. Damien was a storm of contained fury. He moved with a dangerous stillness, his eyes cold and hard, a predator on the hunt. The corporate war was no longer enough. The gloves were off. He called a pack meeting, his voice a low, commanding growl that silenced the room. I stood by his side, my own posture straight, my eyes scanning the faces of our pack members. The spy was among them. A traitor. "We have a leak," Damien announced, his gaze sweeping over the assembled wolves. Someone is feeding Silas information. We've suffered losses because of it. His eyes fell on a young female wolf, her face tear-streaked from the fire. The message was clear. The traitor was responsible for her pain. A ripple of shock and anger went through the crowd. No one spoke, but their silence was a promise of vengeance. The air was charged with a dangerous energy, a readiness to hunt. I spent the next few days in a state of high alert, my senses turned up to their maximum. I watched everyone, but I focused on the one person I had never suspected. Elias. I had dismissed him as a quiet, loyal beta, Damien's right-hand man. But something about him felt off. He was too quiet, too composed. His scent, usually a comforting anchor, had a subtle, strange undertone I couldn't place. I followed him one evening, keeping to the shadows, my footsteps silent. He walked towards the edge of the compound, towards the deep forest that bordered our territory. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of pure adrenaline. My wolf, a low growl rumbling in her throat, was on high alert. This was a dangerous game, a gamble that could cost me my life. He stopped at a clearing, a place of ancient trees and moss-covered rocks. He pulled out a small metallic device, a subtle hum emanating from it. It was a signal jammer. My blood ran cold. The device was meant to block our pack's communication, our silent, telepathic connection. The ultimate act of betrayal. Just as he was about to activate it, I moved. I lunged from the shadows, my voice a low, threatening growl. Elias, what are you doing? He spun around, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and fear. Aurora, he stammered, his facade of calm finally cracking. I can explain. Don't bother, I said, my voice as cold as ice. I already know. You're the traitor. The spy. He dropped the device, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I didn't have a choice, he whispered, his voice laced with a desperate plea. Silas. He has my sister. He threatened to kill her if I didn't cooperate. I had to. My heart, which had been a fortress of fury, cracked. The raw, human desperation in his voice was undeniable. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man caught between two worlds, forced to make an impossible choice. He's been watching you, Aurora, he confessed, his voice trembling. He knows everything about you. He knew you were his mate. He just wanted to get to you first. He has a plan. A trap. Just then a twig snapped in the forest behind us. Elias's head whipped around, his eyes wide with terror. He knows I'm here. He knows I've been found out. A low, menacing growl echoed through the trees. Not one wolf. Dozens. The scent, a sickening mix of Silas's musky smell and raw aggression, filled the air. My heart plummeted. We were surrounded. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a trap. A trap meant to get to me, to get to Damien. I looked at Elias, his face pale with fear. Run, I whispered. Get out of here. Warn Damien. Tell him it's a trap. I can't leave you, he said, his voice a low, choked sob. Yes, you can, I said, my voice firm. You have to. My life is not as important as the pack's survival. I looked him in the eyes, my own filled with a fierce determination. Go. Now. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then with a single regretful nod, he turned and ran, a blur of motion in the darkness. I was alone now, a solitary she-wolf surrounded by a pack of hungry predators. I could hear their footsteps, the low growls, the rustle of leaves as they closed in. The corporate world was a distant memory. My human mask, a forgotten relic. This was the real war. This was my moment of truth. My wolf, once timid and hidden, now roared with a fierce, untamed power. I was no longer running. I was fighting. For my pack. For my alpha. For myself. I stood my ground, my back straight, my chin held high. Let them come. I was ready. Chapter 6. The Sacrifice. The woods were a symphony of menace, a chorus of snarls and low growls that surrounded me. I stood alone in the clearing, the cool night air prickling my skin, my senses on high alert. I was a lone wolf, outnumbered and outmatched, but I wasn't afraid. My fear had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was a Luna, a fighter, and I was going to make them pay for every single injury they had inflicted on my pack. The first wolves emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. They were a motley pack of rogues, their coats scarred and matted, their bodies lean and hungry. They moved in a circle around me, their steps a quiet, sinister rhythm. I held my ground, my eyes fixed on the most powerful one, a massive brute with a scar running across his face. He was the pack's enforcer, the one who would lead the charge. Then he appeared. Silas Cross, a towering figure of a wolf, his coat a pale, ghostly white that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. He was magnificent, a physical embodiment of pure, unadulterated power. But his eyes, a cold, empty blue, were a testament to the darkness within his soul. He was a monster, a king of chaos, and he wanted me. "Look what we have here," he said, his voice a low, mocking growl that vibrated through the air. "The little secretary. The timid little ghost. You've come a long way from a cramped apartment, haven't you?" "I've come far enough to know a coward when I see one," I retorted, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "You hide in the shadows, attacking families, using others to do your dirty work. You're nothing but a snake." He laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that echoed through the trees. "A snake? Oh, little Luna. I am a king. And you are my queen. You were always meant to be mine. Your scent, your power. It's intoxicating. You belong to me. And when I have you, this entire territory will be mine." He lunged, a blur of white fur and muscle. I was ready. I sidestepped, my body moving on instinct, a flash of silver against his white. We fought, a brutal, primal dance of teeth and claws. He was stronger, faster, a seasoned warrior who had known nothing but violence. I was a fledgling, but I had something he didn't, a cause. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my pack. But my human body, my human stamina, was no match for his raw, animalistic strength. He pinned me to the ground, his paw on my chest, a triumphant growl rumbling in his throat. He leaned in, his hot breath on my face. "Surrender, little one. It's so much easier that way." "Never," I snarled, my voice raw with defiance. "I'll die before I become yours." Just then a roar echoed through the forest, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. It was Damien. He burst from the trees, a blur of black fur, a furious storm of vengeance. He slammed into Silas, a clash of two titans, a symphony of snarls and roars that shook the very ground. Silas was a brute, but Damien was a force of nature. He fought with the righteous fury of an alpha defending his pack, his mate. He was a storm, a whirlwind of teeth and claws, and he was winning. But Silas was not a fool. He knew he couldn't beat Damien in a fair fight. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a twisted, triumphant glee. He grabbed me, his claws digging into my arm, and a vicious smile spread across his face. "You may be the alpha of your pack, Blackwood, but I have your Luna. And if you take one more step, I'll tear her throat out." Damien froze, his body rigid with a terrifying stillness. He looked at me, a silent conversation passing between us. His eyes were filled with a mix of love, rage, and a profound, heartbreaking pain. He couldn't risk my life. "Let her go, Silas," Damien said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "This is between you and me." "It's always been about her," Silas sneered, his grip on my arm tightening. "You will surrender your company, your pack lands, everything, or I will kill her right here, right now." Damien's shoulders slumped in defeat. He had no choice. He looked at me, and his eyes, filled with a love so pure it ached, sent a message that bypassed words. "I'll do anything for you." "No, Damien," I whispered, shaking my head. "Don't do it." "Silence," he commanded, his voice filled with a desperate finality. "I will not lose you." He looked at Silas, his eyes filled with a searing, deadly promise. "I surrender. All of it. The company, the lands, all of it. Just let her go." Silas laughed, a high-pitched, triumphant sound. "Smart man. A good alpha knows when to fold." He shoved me towards Damien, and as I stumbled towards him, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a powerful, burning command. "Live Aurora. Lead. And never let them win." Then, in a brutal twist as if to show his final utter contempt for us, Silas lunged not at Damien but at Elias, who had returned, a desperate look of betrayal on his face. Silas's attack was swift and brutal. He tore into Elias, a final act of vengeance against the one who had betrayed him. My vision blurred. I couldn't move. I could only watch as my protector, my friend, fell to the ground, his lifeblood seeping into the earth. I screamed, a sound of pure anguish and rage. Damien, his face a mask of grief, lunged at Silas, a new, terrifying fury fueling his every move. But Silas was gone, a blur of white fur disappearing into the trees, leaving behind a trail of death and betrayal. I ran to Elias, falling to my knees, my hands shaking. His body was still, his eyes fixed on the night sky, a silent, final apology. I sobbed, a raw, primal sound of pure grief. Then a low, keening whine filled the air. It was Damien. He stood over Elias's body, his head bowed, his body trembling with a grief so profound it ripped at my soul. He had lost his beta, his brother. And I had lost a friend. I looked at my alpha, my love, a man broken by loss, a ruler brought to his knees by a monster. But the grief in his eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. A cold, burning rage. A promise of vengeance. He turned to me, his eyes a terrifying mix of pain and fury. The wolf within him, the alpha, was screaming for blood. And I, the Luna, the woman who had once been a ghost, knew with a chilling certainty that the war had just begun. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. And I was going to lead the charge. A new dawn. The morning sun, a brutal, unforgiving orb, rose over the valley, painting the sky in colors of fire and blood. The scent of rain-soaked earth and wet fur was now tainted with the coppery smell of loss. We stood there side by side, our clothes torn and bloodied, our hearts aching with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. Elias was gone. A brave beta, a loyal friend, a man caught between two monsters. Damien, my alpha, my love, was silent. His face was a mask of grief, his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying fury. He had lost his brother. He had surrendered his empire. And he had done it all to save me. But the surrender was a lie. A temporary truce in a war that had just begun. Silas, in his arrogance, had made a fatal mistake. He had taken our sacrifice and thrown it back in our faces, a final, cruel act of power. He had no idea what he had unleashed. I looked at Damien, my hand finding his, our fingers lacing together. The corporate secretary was dead. The timid ghost was gone. In her place was a Luna, a warrior, a leader. My love for him, a love born of moonlight and primal instinct, was no longer a weakness. It was my strength. It was our weapon. I looked out at the sunrise, the first rays of light hitting the trees, a promise of a new day. But this was not just a new day. It was a new beginning. A new war. A war for survival. A war for vengeance. A war for our future. Silas had broken my world, but in doing so he had created something stronger, something unbreakable. He had created a she-wolf who would not hide. A Luna who would not surrender. He had created a love that would not die. He had created a legacy that would rise from the ashes of his destruction. I was no longer running. I was fighting. And I was going to lead the charge. Want to see what happens next? This story is just the beginning. If you want to read more stories like this, where a seemingly ordinary character discovers their true power and falls in love in the process, then hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Don't miss a single video. And let me know in the comments below what you want to see happen to Aurora and Damien next.